some of those issues which derive from his domestic agenda will impact countries like India, particularly issues regarding illegal immigration, legal movement of people. There is an element of racism in this whole approach because I think it reflects white anxiety in the US. This is also a provision which has been misused because, in fact, many people just go and visit the United States and have their baby there, and that qualifies the children for birthright citizenship. What we might see is some tightening of conditions for issue of H-1B visas, and they might make extensions more difficult. And certainly they might make green card registrations more difficult. Students are little over 3.5 lakhs. It would impact them. It won't impact those who've got green cards. For Trump's supporters, this political theater, if I may call it that, plays well. And Trump is the master of the dramatic gesture. There will be early instances of showing that now we are, getting our act together. If, deportations of that magnitude take place, it will be a challenge for the two countries to navigate. Overall, it's a much more uncertain world that we are entering and more turbulent because there's nothing fixed about Trump's policies, and he's quite mercurial, can change his mind, and wants to play hardball. He loves also reaching deals. So there's both aspects. He likes to threaten, and then he likes to show that he got a big win because he was strong and he was able to use US power to extract a bargain.
Hello and welcome to HT's weekly talk show, The Interview, wherein we focus on what is making news and, of course, the big picture. It is perhaps for the first time that the swearing in of a president of a foreign country has generated so much interest among Indians. In fact, it is anxiety more than interest because the future of many Indians seem to be linked to what the president does or does not. No guesses for this one because we are talking of none other than US President Donald Trump. Despite his pre-poll rhetoric of ending birthright citizenship, when he actually went ahead and did it, it sent shockwaves among Indians both in India and the US. What does this mean? How would it impact India and America? What are the options for hundreds and thousands of Indians who are either in the US or looking to go there? There are many issues that need to be decoded and explained, and this is exactly what we will do here today. We have with us Meera Shankar, who has served as India's ambassador to the US. She is here with us to discuss the good and bad of Trump's executive order and its impact on India and Indians. Meera Shankar here with us in this edition of HT's weekly talk show, The Interview. Welcome to the show, Ms. Meera Shankar, and thank you for being here with us.
Thank you, my pleasure.
US President Donald Trump is making news by the minute, so to speak. In fact, his second tenure has generated a great deal of anxiety, and I underline the word anxiety among Indians. Before we decode some of his executive orders, let me ask you, is this anxiety justified or is it much ado about nothing?
Well, I think Trump has come with a very strong agenda during his second term, and he's got a bigger political mandate for this because he controls both the Senate and the US House of Representatives, and he has a right leaning Supreme Court. So he's in a more powerful position than many US presidents have been at the beginning of their term. And compared to his first term, he wants to show that he's ready to act, he's confident, and he's going to act swiftly. So, some of those issues which derive from his domestic agenda will impact countries like India, particularly issues regarding illegal immigration, legal movement of people, trade, and energy.
So, are you saying, and as I am understanding, that the anxiety amongst Indians is justified and it is not pure rhetoric?
No, it's not pure rhetoric because it means that there is now a whole new framework within which these issues will be dealt with. So, for instance, take illegal immigration. Uh, Trump has made this a core issue during his campaign, and most polls also showed that the majority of Americans favor tougher action on illegal migrants because there was a surge in illegal migration during the early years of Biden. For Trump's supporters, this has been a key. And he's showing that he's going to act on it, saying he will order the biggest mass deportation in history. His target is to deport about 1 million persons each year. If you compare it to his first term, the deportations were of the order of 20,000 a year. So it's an almost 5 times increase. Now, amongst the 1.5 million Americans who have been identified as being ready for deportation because they have completed the hearings on their legal processes, there are about 18,000 Indian nationals. These will be deported immediately. And of course, we have said that India does not support illegal migration and that we are ready to take back our nationals. The question is that the process of identifying who are our nationals, because many times these people don't have papers at all, or they have forged or illegal papers, that itself takes time. And Trump is threatening that countries who delay taking back their nationals will be subjected to tariffs. So this will impact us. But more important, there are a total of around 11 million or so illegals residing in the United States since quite some time. And of these, 7,25,000 or so are believed to be Indians. And so that's a much larger figure than the 18,000 or so which are coming back, in the near future. Now, if deportations of that magnitude take place, it will be a challenge for the two countries to navigate. It's not going to be a smooth and quick process. It'll probably take a bit of time. So, this will be something which will be challenging for the two countries to handle.
Having said that, deputations in the past have been low key rather than plane loads on special flights being sent back. Mr. Jaishankar has called it bad optics if you have a visible deportation.
Yes, but for Trump's supporters, this political theater, if I may call it that, plays well. And Trump is the master of the dramatic gesture. So at least I think he would like to have some demonstrable, signs that he is implementing his agenda. I'm sure the bulk will take place in a more routine fashion, but there will be early instances of showing that now we are, getting our act together.
And what Mr. Jaishankar has called bad optics.
Yes, it will be bad optics for India, especially if they are very large numbers. These are people then without jobs who've lost everything. They've probably paid a lot to, to get where they are in the United States, and they would lose everything and come back. It will be a difficult issue for India to handle their reintegration into Indian society.
What do you make of India preparing to take back all citizens residing illegally? Of course, our position on that is very clear. But is this, in one sense, bending over backwards to please the Trump administration or a compromise to avoid a trade war?
No, I think that this has generally been India's position that we do not support illegal migration of our nationals. But most governments have not been also that aggressive about deportations. And as I said, it takes time also to identify if they are our nationals. And I think for India, the fact that we don't support illegal migration has also been because we actually support legal movement of people. We want the ability for our professionals to go and work in the rest of the world in pursuance of contracts or in pursuance of temporary work arrangements organized by that government. And obviously, if there's a lot of illegal migration and a country is seen as supporting that, then there's not a lot of sympathy for legal movement of people, and that gets impacted. And that is in our interest in terms of actually trade and business, especially our software and service exports.
Policy apart, but there is in a common person's mind that Trump said it and India is doing it. But at the same time, the optics seem to be that here is India doing Trump's bidding even before Trump has really spelt it out or pushed India to do it.
Well, I think let's see what actually happens. As I said, these 18,000 are ready for deportation, but the remaining, there's a complex process to finding them, to putting them in camps. And there could be challenges also from civil society if somebody has lived there, let's say, for 4 years or 5 years. Will that be challenged, and how will the courts respond on that? So this whole process has to play out. I don't see an imminent return of a large number, but yes, I agree with you that the optics would be terrible, and there is an element of racism in this whole approach, because I think it reflects white anxiety in the US about potential demographic decline and what they call, like Steve Bannon has called the browning of America through illegal migration. So, that I think does not strike a very good tone for Indians.
Also, the Trump administration would, as you said, want to play out the see we did it theme and therefore prefer high visibility levels. How do you see that panning out?
I would hope that the administration itself will be more amenable to to discussions on how the process should play out. And it's important for India to stress this, that the political optics of a very visible, very theatrical operation will not go down well, will make it more difficult for India to process these deportations. So, a little discretion and using a low key approach would probably make it smoother process for both sides. I think that's something which legitimately the Indian government should stress.
But don't you then see both working at cross purposes? Because Mr. Trump, for his own domestic politics, would like it to be I did it theme, while India would want low visibility. So, don't you think that there would be conflict, maybe a strong word, disagreements, or no meeting ground or no level playing field?
Look, right now he would want to show that he's acting. But out of these 1.5 million ready for deportation, only 18,000 are from India. The remainder are largely from countries in Latin America. So that is where he will be visible. The first lot, 1.5 million being pushed across the border into Mexico. And it's easier also done because they don't necessarily have to have plane loads. It can be also by road across the border and so on. So I think that is where the initial publicity will be given. And after that, I'm sure that those who are administering this will also not want a circus, because the minute you have a media circus around it, oh, children and babies are being separated from their parents and so on. I mean, it can become counterproductive for the US, because opponents, it's not just supporters who'll gather, it's also opponents who may gather. And so I'm sure that those who are administering the program, not the political leadership, would want after a certain point of time to reduce the media circus around it.
So, as I understand it, perhaps a sane move would be not to focus on sending back Indians to India, but maybe for domestic purposes, Mr. Trump would probably send back truckloads or plane loads to Mexico.
Well, he will send back Indians to India, but his focus will be on the areas where he can more easily show success.
Also, India hopes that Trump administration would protect legal immigration channels like students' visas and H-1B visas for skilled workers.
Yes, certainly. And here there's a bit of a debate within the Trump constituency, his MAGA constituency, led by leaders like Steve Bannon, have been vociferously against the H-1B program, saying that it displaces Americans from jobs, and that since this allows them to finally register for green cards and citizenship, that it is contributing to, as I said, the browning of America. So this is the MAGA constituency pushing strongly for a halt to the program. On the other hand, you have US businesses, particularly big tech and finance, which rely on the H-1B visa program for getting skilled workers, because there's a skills shortage in the United States. So this program, actually far from displacing American workers, contributes to the competitiveness of US companies. And American big tech has come out, especially Elon Musk, has come out very strongly in favor of the H-1B visa program, using unparliamentary language, as is his wont. But Trump has also spoken in favor of the H-1B program on two occasions. The latest with the CEOs of these big tech companies present with him, says, I like the H-1B visa program and we need this, we need the skills. So as of now, he has spoken in favor of the program, but I think it's going to be an ongoing debate. And what we might see is some tightening of conditions for issue of H-1B visas, like they might raise the visa fees, they could raise an annual fee on the H-1B program, and they might make extensions more difficult, because the visa is for 3 years. It's a temporary work visa. It's for 3 years, extendable by another 3 years. And in that time, actually, many apply for green cards and they get other jobs and they get, sponsored under another H-1B visa. So they might make extensions more difficult, and certainly they might make green card registrations more difficult for H-1B visa holders. But I don't see the program itself being halted because it's very, very important to retaining US economic competitiveness.
So, kind of a quid pro quo, if I may use the term, send out or clamp down on illegal migrants and protect, maybe a strong word, the H-1B visa seekers.
Yes, but I think that's good from our point of view because I think our interest is much more in legal movement of people. And in fact, with many countries in Europe where they are facing demographic decline, so actually looking to hire, Indian workers on contract in several fields where they may have shortages. So I think this is really our priority. And as long as they retain these provisions or other provisions which enable legal movement of workers, it's in our interest. It's also in our interest if talent actually comes back to India because we are looking at growing our economy, we are looking at building our tech sectors. So, at some level, it's also something which benefits us when there is brain circulation, as I said, when it goes around and comes back.
Let us now discuss the order on birthright citizenship. Of course, one of the courts, one of the judges has thrown it out as unconstitutional. But I would request you to decode this before we discuss the status and the sanctity of an executive order.
See, till now, any individual born in the US was entitled to citizenship by birthright, which is enshrined in the Constitution. Now, this is also a provision which has been misused because, in fact, many people just go and visit the United States and have their baby there, and that qualifies the children for birthright citizenship. Or many illegals also have babies there, and then the child is qualified for birthright citizenship. So, Trump passed an executive order to end citizenship by birthright for illegals as well as foreigners who are there legally, like H-1B visa holders and so on, students. So, this is obviously something which has been challenged. 22 governors of Democrat ruled states
Mm.
in the US have actually moved a legal challenge saying that this is unconstitutional because it's enshrined in the US Constitution and it cannot be changed by an executive order. So, actually, hearings are taking place. The court has, for the time being, in a federal court, they have put a stay on the
Yes.
implementation of the executive order. So I think this whole process will play out. I don't know what the outcome will be because the Supreme Court is a conservative leaning one. But strictly in terms of interpretation of US constitutional provisions, it does not conform to that.
Let me ask you, what is the status and sanctity of an executive order?
An executive order comes into force, but if there is a law, it's like our ordinances. When the Indian government passes an ordinance, it's not a law. And in India, within 6 months, we have to get it passed as a law, or the ordinance lapses, or reissue the ordinance. In America, these executive orders are valid except if it is overturning a law. The law has to be overturned by legal action within Congress. And if it's a constitutional amendment which is required, then that has to be moved through the Congress and through the states.
But isn't Trump in a strong position? And as you said, he's in a better position politically also.
See, two-thirds majority is required. It's not for a constitutional amendment, it's not an ordinary majority. I don't see that happening in the Congress because in the lower house, he has only a 5 or 6 seat majority. It's a very narrow majority. It's not like he's got 80% of the house with him. Students are little over 3.5 lakhs. We are the largest foreign student population in the US. So 330,000 students, some may be there with their families, it would impact them. It would impact all the H-1B visa holders who are there on temporary work permits. It won't impact those who've got green cards. It won't impact, obviously, those who have citizenship, who've been registered for American citizenship. And there are believed to be around 4 million or so Indian Americans in the US. But it will impact the student and H-1B visa population.
What does this mean for Indians and what does this mean for America? The good and bad. Let us discuss both these aspects.
Look, the good is that America is preserving legal movement of people and they are within their rights to act on illegal immigration. After all, no country wants to be, overwhelmed by entry of illegal, foreigners. So they are within their rights to take action. I suppose it's the scale and the manner in which it will be done which will really determine the kind of impact in India. Overall, it's a much more uncertain world that we are entering and more turbulent because there's nothing fixed about Trump's policies and he's quite mercurial, can change his mind, and wants to play hardball, even with his closest allies, on issues of trade, on forcing them to step up defense expenditure, and so on. And for India, this means we have to be ready to negotiate with the US, but also hold our ground, on issues which may be, important to us, while at the same time showing flexibility to negotiate.
While on
Because,
negotiations, do you
huh,
think India and US, there is a level playing field or somewhere India is on the back foot?
look, there is a huge asymmetry of power between the two, no? So that plays out in negotiations, but it is not as though, India needs the US alone. We do need the US because they are our largest market. We don't really have a trade surplus with many trading partners, but we do have a small trade surplus with the US. More important, our entire high technology sector, our entire IT and software services sector has grown on the basis of linkage with the US economy. Almost, the US accounts for almost 70% of India's software and service exports. So we do need the United States and we need them as a balancer in Asia. But the US also needs India because India is a growing market, going to be one of the big markets of the future. We are an island of stability in an arc of instability stretching from Africa, the Middle East, onwards. And India is also an important balancer in Asia for the US in the Indo Pacific. So I think both countries have an interest in growing the strategic partnership. I think the challenge will be to see that we build on areas of convergence, which are many, and are not overwhelmed by potential disruptions on account of Mr. Trump's domestic priorities and agenda.
Does this order come as a surprise despite Trump's pre poll rhetoric. And this is something Trump had wanted to do even in his first term. So, why now? And immediately after taking over, what was the urgency?
Well, he's issued about 80 orders overturning President Biden's decisions on immigration, on environment. He's walked out of the Paris agreement on climate change. He's walked out of the WHO. So he's a man in a hurry. He wants to show that now he's in command, he's going to act decisively, he's going to act swiftly. I was joking and saying he's passed so many executive orders that now he can go and play golf.
Well said. Much is said about the chemistry between Mr. Modi and Mr. Trump. Can chemistry play a role to India's advantage?
Look, it helps at the margins. It's positive at the margins, but countries act on the basis of what they perceive to be in their interest, on the basis of their domestic political agendas and priorities. You're going to see that play out with the US and Mr. Modi. But yes, there is an ideological affinity between the government in India and the government in the US because they are both conservative governments. And though, of course, we have a much stronger emphasis on, welfare along with, liberal economic policies. But President Trump has shown that he is more comfortable working with those whom he sees as being not so ideologically separate from him and his worldview. So that should be a positive, but it's not the main determinant of how countries engage with each other.
Their politics also seems to be similar. Circus, high drama. Mr. Modi and Mr. Trump both enjoy that.
Well, both are good communicators, and both have this ability for both rhetorical flourish and the telling political theatrical gesture.
So it works.
It works.
Mr. Jaishankar, in his recent talks with the Trump administration, brought up the visa wait issue for Indians.
Yeah.
400 days to get a US visa. Do you think anything will change vis a vis the visa regime?
Well, I would imagine that they might become more restrictive or less uh, eager to process visas quickly. But quite frankly, the relationship cannot achieve its potential in terms of business, in terms of economic cooperation, technological cooperation, in terms of people to people exchanges, if you cannot get there in the first place, if our nationals are not able to visit, and you have such a long wait list, I think it is a constraint on building the relationship in the way that both countries should want to.
So, do you think anything will change? Anything is likely to change? Or rigid as President Trump is, uh, he won't budge?
They need to enhance the level of staffing and the capacities at their outsourcing company also. Otherwise, this delay will continue. Whether Trump will actually do that, I don't know, because overall, his approach is less friendly to movement of foreigners to the US, including,
So,
like he said, he's going to clamp down on family based migration. Whereas earlier, see, if you had old parents in India, they could migrate to the US using the family route. He said he's going to clamp down on that. So then he might make it more difficult for elderly members of families to go there, fearing that they could become potential long term residents. So I don't know, but overall, I would say I would expect movement more in the negative side than on the positive side. I want to mention Kumkum, and that is that if the atmosphere in the US, social atmosphere, becomes hostile for people who look demographically different to the whites like Indians do, then I think that, people will think twice about looking at the US as the country they want to aspire to. Somebody who's been a long term resident of the US means, and he's a US citizen now, he says that now he feels scared going to a bar
Mm.
and making any loud comments for fear that he will be beaten up. So,
Yeah.
if there is a socially hostile atmosphere which develops for people who look demographically different to white Americans, then, people may have a pause saying, why not go and study in Canada? Why not go and study in Australia or UK rather than go to a country where, there's so much hostility to us?
It's quite clear that Mr. Donald Trump is using tariffs as a political tool. If Denmark did not sell Greenland to America, its exports to the American market will be heavily taxed. If Canada did not agree to be America's 51st state, tariffs would be a tool to cripple its economy, and so on and so forth. In fact, at the World Economic Forum, Mr. Trump said, manufacture in America and the tariffs will be very low. What do you see this as?
So the point is that President Trump sees tariffs as a means to level the playing field, as he says, for America in trade and economic cooperation. But he also sees it as a means to raise revenue for his budget because he's going to cut taxes. There's already a huge deficit, financial deficit, which the US has. And therefore, when asked actually, how do you propose to raise revenue to meet the shortfall as a result of tax cuts, he said tariffs. Thirdly, he sees it as something which gives him leverage vis a vis other countries in geopolitics. So if you don't take back your illegal migrants, he threatens to impose tariffs. If you don't, if Canada and Mexico don't cooperate in reducing the flow of illegal migrants or reducing the flow of fentanyl, they will face 25% tariffs. So he uses it as a bargaining chip, and he loves also uh, reaching deals. So there's both aspects. He likes to threaten, and then he likes to show that he got a big win because he was strong and he was able to use US power to extract a bargain.
What does this mean for India? And going forward, how tough would the road ahead be?
Look, I think that we have to wait and see what he does first. No, I mean, like with China, the threat was 60%. Now he's talking of 10%. And he's perhaps also positioning himself for doing a deal. So, since India may not be in the line of sight of the first order of trading partners whom he targets, I think we should wait and see. We shouldn't lose our cool.
What would be the stumbling blocks? You said there are areas where we can work together. Which are the areas which you think would hit a roadblock?
I think both immigration will be a point of constant pressure. Trade could be a point of potential friction. Uh, on renewable energies and technologies, because the US under Biden had fairly extensive aid programs, both bilaterally and through multilateral organizations supporting this, that may dry up. The governmental funding will dry up.
And on migration with truckloads or plane loads coming back, how do you see this impacting India's employment back home and the burden on the government? Because as it is, there are no jobs.
Sure,
So, is
it
the
will
crisis
be.
staring us in the face?
Yeah, it will be difficult. It will be difficult for India if you have a large number of people who come back, who are unemployed, and who need to be integrated. But many may also try to migrate to other countries legally.
Mr. Jaishankar has said that he felt that there is a positive sentiment towards India. As someone who has watched developments closely, do you see that, or do you see this as mere optimism without substance?
Look, the fact that the Quad meeting was held alongside the inauguration, the kind of statements that they've made, uh, I think there is a bipartisan consensus in the US amongst Republicans and Democrats to grow the relationship with India. And this broad framework will continue to apply, because there are converging strategic interests in the Indo Pacific, there are growing economic ties and technological cooperation. And then there are growing exchanges at the people to people level. So it's not just a kind of unidimensional relationship, it's a pretty broad based relationship. And within this framework, I think there is recognition in the US of the importance of India at this juncture in the Indo Pacific, and also within India of the importance of the US. Now, having said this, there will be disruptions because of the domestic priorities and pulls and pushes of Trump's agenda.
So you don't see it as hollow optimism.
Uh, I think really we have to wait and see. But like Marco Rubio used to head, he was a strong supporter of India, or Michael Waltz, the new national security advisor. He used to co chair the India caucus in the Congress. So these are people with a commitment to building the Indo US relationship, and they are key advisors to Trump in the area of foreign policy and geopolitics. So I would imagine that there would be continuity.
So even if happy times are not ahead, all is not lost.
Yes, I would say that uh, by and large, the broad contours of the relationship will remain. And at the same time, you're going to have these disruptions, which we will have to manage.
Ms. Veera Shankar, thank you very much. Thank you for your time. And thank you for decoding and simplifying lots of the complex problems and the anxiety India is facing post Mr. Donald Trump's swearing in.
Thank you, Kumkum.